This week on Capitol Journal, the legislative session is just days away. We'll preview what to expect when the governor and legislature kick things off on Tuesday. I'm speaking with both caucus leaders, House Majority Leader Scott Stadthagen and House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels, about what their caucuses will be shooting for this session. Plus, new Alabama Insurance Commissioner Mark Fowler is in studio to explain the role his agency plays in consumer protection. It's all next on Capitol Journal. From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. We are just days away from the 2023 regular legislative session, and we have a full show of preview coverage for you. But first, leading the news tonight is President Joe Biden's visit to Selma Sunday for the Bridge Crossing Jubilee. This year marks the 58th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, when white police beat black civil rights marchers as they attempted to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The event was a turning point in the civil rights movement and led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The visit comes as Selma is still recovering from a January tornado that damaged much of downtown. Looking elsewhere nationally, U.S. Senator Katie Britt made another visit to the Mexican border this week. She's urging President Biden and his administration to make immigration and border enforcement a greater priority. She called the situation a humanitarian and national security crisis.
It is not only a humanitarian crisis, it's a national security crisis. It's both. We got to see that last night as we walked up and down the border, got to see people who were trying to cross, a woman with a 6-month-old baby and a couple with a 6-year-old little boy. When we looked at that and thought that they made it, they told us about the kids who don't. They told us about finding a 15-year-old who drowned in the river. The cost of this crisis is real. We were able to put a face with it last night.
On Tuesday, state lawmakers will convene this year's regular session of the Alabama legislature. The annual session consists of 30 legislative days within 105 calendar days. That means the session will probably last until June. Each year, the legislature's primary responsibility is to pass budgets funding the range of state services. But this year, there is much more money than usual to dole out. The state still has the second tranche of its American Rescue Plan Act money, worth about $1.1 billion. Governor Kay Ivey is expected to call a special session to focus lawmakers' attention solely on that issue, just as she did with the first half of the ARPA money. Senate President Pro Tem Greg Reed said recently that that's a good idea.
I think there has been benefit in isolating the discussions of ARPA from the regular budget process. We saw that in the last ARPA round that we dealt with, to where we did that in a special, and I think it was very beneficial to do that. I would be supportive of managing the ARPA funds in a special.
Another big fiscal decision facing the legislature is what to do with a $2.7 billion surplus in the Education Trust Fund. There is talk of a one-time tax rebate that would offer Alabamians anywhere from $200 to $500, depending on their status. I spoke with House Education Budget Chairman Danny Garrett recently, who said the size of that rebate will be a big topic of discussion when the session begins.
I think we're in a good spot. We're not alone in having the surplus. Now the question is, what do we do with that surplus? There's a lot of talk about doing a tax rebate, which I think is something that we are going to talk about. The governor certainly indicated that she would like to do that, and a lot of support for that. We're beginning to hear some people kind of push back on that and say, well, why don't we redirect the money into some of these areas that are underperforming in the state? We'll have that discussion. My sense is we'll probably do a rebate of some size. Some people talk about permanent tax cuts, but when you look at the state of Alabama's taxes and you put them all together, we're very low on property taxes. We have higher sales tax rates. They're local sales tax rates primarily. Mm-hmm. You put all of it together, though, we are the lowest tax per capita in the country. So when you're trying to look at how we perform and compete against other states and the services we provide, you have to consider that.
One key priority for Governor Ivey and the legislature is reauthorizing and revising the state's economic development incentive laws, which are used to recruit industry to the state. Most expect that to be an issue taken up quickly when the session begins.
I've carried those legislative items in the Senate for the Jobs Act, the Growing Alabama, the AIM Act, the renewal of the Jobs Act. Those have all been things that I've been focused on for the betterment of my career in the legislature. So I think they're huge. They've paid big dividends to the people of Alabama. We've had huge job growth as a result. We've got to renew them. Now, do they need to be different? Do they need to be tweaked some? Yes. The landscape of the competitive environment that we find ourselves in competing against Louisiana or Michigan or North Carolina or whatever is constantly changing. So we need to be very vigilant in making sure that we are looking at the detail of how we best put Alabama's foot forward to be able to recruit the industry that we want in our area, and not just recruitment focus on topics associated with traditional industrial and manufacturing growth. Those are very important, and we've had great success there. But also in making sure, as we look at innovation and the knowledge-based economy and startups and entrepreneurship, that we're doing our part in being able to focus on those as well, because those are the big businesses of the future.
On the Democratic side, Senate Minority Leader Bobby Singleton shared what his caucus's top priorities for the session would be at a recent appearance.
Medicaid expansion, more jobs in our community, making sure that we get a good job act. Broadband is going to be very crucial in terms of making an expansion of broadband across our districts in rural area and even in unserved urban areas. Those are going to be our top priorities. And we're going to also do a top priority on exceptions to the abortion rule. We're going to try to bring that back up. Let's try to put on those exceptions. And we're going to be talking about prenatal care, postnatal care for women who this state of Alabama does not provide.
On revisiting Alabama's abortion law, Singleton wants rape and incest to be considered as two exceptions to the abortion ban. Gambling is another issue that Senator Singleton has advocated for years, but with limited success. Asked whether we might see a serious gambling bill this session, here was his response.
Let me get my violin out. I really don't know. It's going to be a hard question. I think the members here in the Senate wants to see a gaming bill start in the House. We passed it in the Senate the last time. With 30 plus odd new members in the House, I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know what their thinking is on gaming. I don't know if anybody ever surveyed that. So it's going to be interesting to see where we are. I think that there will be a gaming bill come, but will it get out of the House? I'm not sure.
Speaking of new members, there are 31 new lawmakers in the House and 6 in the Senate. That means almost a fourth of the entire legislature will be freshmen. Capitol Journal recently spoke to a handful of these new members about initiatives they are working on.
At the end of the 4 years, I want people in my district to see substantial changes, right? And so, for example, I am on the Information and Technology Oversight Committee. I'm also over broadband oversight, and so just excited to be able to make strides in some of those areas. I'm also on the Health Committee, as well as the General Fund Budget Committee. So it's really important for me as a priority to steer resources to the communities in which I serve.
I would love to be a part of the incentives committee and people that actually recruit industry, and I'm a CPA by profession, so I could sort of talk that business language, and I hope I have a chance to work in that regard going forward. I like recruiting industry. I believe an employed family is the most liberated family that you can have, because it's their work, their money, their choice on how to spend it, and also it'll give their children a chance to remain at home or close by without having to move across the country to find good employment. So I'm all about industry and recruitment and employment.
Oh, well, education. Being a former teacher, special education teacher, education is huge. Also, community development, economic development as well.
Well, the state may be seeing surpluses in the budgets, but for some chronically underfunded state agencies, the demand still far outweighs the available resources. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott caught up with one state agency that has lawmakers' special attention these days.
Lawmakers got an early feel of a regular session thanks to budget hearings. Now it's time for the real thing. Having many issues to deal with, funding for agencies is near the top. The Department of Mental Health has seen its workload increase due to mental health issues around Alabama.
The isolation that happened during COVID, one of the things we learned through that process is isolation is actually the worst thing in the world we can do for our mental health. And so we saw a lot of increase in anxiety and depression, not only among adults, but also with our kids.
Commissioner Kim Boswell, like other agency heads, will closely monitor this session. She asked lawmakers during the budget hearings for help to deal with mental health issues.
Out of our budget request for $41 million, $30 million of that, 30.6, was around workforce issues. And trying to get ahead of some of the workforce issues that are out there right now is a huge task for us.
Commissioner Boswell says progress has already started, but other items are in need.
We've been busy building the Alabama Crisis System of Care and opening up crisis centers and deploying mobile crisis teams so people have access to care 24/7. There's such a shortage of mental health professionals that even if you have the best coverage in the world, sometimes you're told you have to wait 6, 8, 12 weeks to get in to see a psychiatrist or a therapist.
Boswell adds lawmakers are considering her request.
We certainly hope to receive the funding we have in our request, but we're very grateful that we have lawmakers who really are looking at the economic conditions, looking at, is this revenue that's going to continue?
For Capitol Journal, I'm Randy Scott.
More broadly, almost every state agency is reporting difficulty keeping up with the higher costs of inflation and trouble finding available qualified workers. Capitol Journal's Karen Goldsmith reports.
If we learned anything during the recent legislative budget hearings, it's that the agencies responsible for managing the daily functions of state government are not immune from the current shortage of employees and the rising costs of inflation. Alabama's Bureau of Pardons and Paroles.
This is what I was talking about earlier on gas prices. You can see in 2020, we're at roughly monthly costs of $46,009, so really $47,000. Now, monthly, we're at $98,600. That's been a challenge. That's part of our budget increase, is just so that we can pad ourselves so we don't get hit if another gas crisis comes into effect.
The State Department of Education.
We have to buy tires for buses. We run 83 million miles a year on our school buses, and that's a lot of tires, and tires cost a lot more money this year than they cost last year.
Alabama's Department of Corrections has been historically plagued by the shortage of corrections officers, so much so that a federal judge has mandated those numbers increase. They currently have 1,732 security staffers, yet they have a need for 688 more. But there is a glimmer of hope for the state's Department of Corrections. They say a silver lining is starting to form around that dark cloud.
We had about 8 quarters of decline in staffing. We were losing more people than we were bringing in. Last quarter, that number leveled off. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but that is a huge victory for us. So we want to continue to level off and go up.
The commissioner noted that the retention bonuses have helped them maintain 65% of its corrections officers. For Capitol Journal, I'm Karen Goldsmith.
And make a note, Governor Kay Ivey will deliver her State of the State address Tuesday night at 6 o'clock from the state capitol. We will be broadcasting the speech live here on APT. And in fact, we'll have 2 hours of live coverage that night, complete with analysis from fellow journalists. We'll also feature the official Democratic response delivered by State Representative Barbara Drummond right here in studio. And starting Monday, Capitol Journal will return to the air every weekday throughout the legislative session. We'll have a breakdown of the daily activities from the House and Senate, plus a few interesting and influential guests. That's Monday through Thursday at 10:30 p.m. and Friday at the usual 7:30 time. And we'll be right back with tonight's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal Podcasts.
Joining me next is State Representative Scott Stadthagen, Majority Leader for the Alabama House of Representatives. Mr. Leader, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
This is the first conversation that we've had after you've been elected Majority Leader. That was kind of took place after the elections, after the statewide elections. Mm-hmm. You're now the Majority Leader for the House. Congratulations on that. What can we expect from your leadership in that House caucus?
Well, thank you, Todd. Very, very thankful for the opportunity. Blessed to serve in this capacity for the House. We're going to hit the ground running. We're going to make sure that we're there for our members. That's my number one job as House Majority Leader, and going to give them the tools and resources they need to be successful and cross the finish line to make our state better.
Mm-hmm. So walk me through a little bit of that, because maybe our viewers could use a refresher, because we've got the speaker, right? Mm-hmm. He's always there with the gavel and all that kind of thing. But then each caucus has its majority leader. So in your role, is it partly legislative and partly political, understanding that you're talking about just the Republicans?
Just the Republicans. We are a supermajority in the House, 77 members in our caucus, and we are a team, and we've got our personal policies that mean a lot to us. And throughout different pieces of legislation that we work together on, and we decide which is best for our state and support it and go forward.
Mm-hmm. We just got finished with an election, so we've got 4 years to go. That may seem like a long time, but everybody wants to think ahead and make sure they're doing the things in the State House, in the legislature, to prepare themselves for re-election. Is that also a component of what your role is?
Absolutely. So it's my job to educate the constituents in the districts of their members, and make sure that they have the tools and resources, and do like town hall meetings. We just got done doing a round of town hall meetings in my district personally, and we provided town hall packages for all the members that would give them kind of a guide to go through from previous session, and then what we have on the uprising too.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because people might not realize, unlike the federal government, Congress, and even other maybe wealthier states, we don't have a ton of staff to really help with members. So they might look toward the caucus for some of those resources and everything. Seeing as they have in the House, especially, they're probably sharing assistants and secretaries and things.
They are. They're supposed to actually meet their clerks in the next week.
Yeah. Well, moving to the session, it'll be here in just a few days. Lots of talk about issues on the agenda, but I was wondering from you, what is there going to be an official agenda? I know we've seen that sort of in years past. Is it going to be more informal? What is your plan going forward with the caucus?
I think we're just starting out in our first year of the quadrennium, and it's for us to build our team. We've got 26 new members in the House Republican side, and that's a third of our caucus. So I think we need to build relationships, get to know one another, and prioritize within our caucus and what's important to our state this year. I know fentanyl is going to be a huge number one agenda for us. Something that the speaker is passionate about, something that I'm passionate about. Representative Simpson's leading the charge on that, and he's going to do a really good job with getting across the finish line as well.
And this is essentially increasing penalties for those who traffic in fentanyl, especially over a certain amount.
That's right, absolutely. I mean, we've got, just at a town hall meeting last night, we talked to my sheriff and my police chief, and they're talking about Class D felonies, how we really need to keep the bad guys off the street, and they're struggling right now doing that.
We're also hearing a lot about, somewhat of a related issue, and that's mental health. This issue has really increased in maybe priority or focus over the last 4 or 5 years. You go back 15 years or 20 years, nobody wanted to talk about mental health, but they certainly do now. You mentioned the speaker, it's one of his top priorities, the governor as well. What do you think we might see on the mental health front in this session, having just heard from the commissioner?
Yeah, so, the speaker was our majority leader last quadrennium, and he kind of led the charge on that and did a phenomenal job. So we have been neglecting mental health financially over a decade, and we're seeing the results of that. So we're playing catch up, and we have done a lot of work in the past couple of years, and we need to continue to do that. And it's hitting our schools, it's hitting families, it's hitting our prison systems, our hospitals. Everybody is being impacted by mental health in our state, and I think it's something that has to be on the top list of our priorities.
Mm-hmm. And I found it interesting the other day at budget hearings when the commissioner, Kim Boswell, when she's talking about, look, we've set up these new crisis centers, and everybody's happy about that, but they're even having trouble staffing the facilities that they have, so that just compounds the problem. That's
right. And just like our hospitals, our hospitals and nursing homes right now, we've got beds available, but we don't have the staff to care for those beds. So we've got the facilities, we've got the space. Now we need the employees to be doing the job, and that's a struggle across the board.
Yeah, and that feeds into workforce development. That feeds into I've heard a lot of lawmakers, Republican and Democrat, frankly, talk about getting folks off the sidelines, finding pathways to folks who aren't participating in the workforce to participating in the workforce. I mean, look, there's no silver bullet there, but maybe a variety of ways. But it seems like we keep hearing about workforce shortages, not just in the private sector, but in the public sector.
That's right. Absolutely. So just through my district alone, when I drive around and throughout the industries, I see help wanted signs on every single door. And I think it's time for us to start really talking to these kids that are fixing to graduate high school and let them know how important it is to learn a trade and to become a machinist or a welder. Within years after graduating high school, you can really make a good living. Back when we were growing up, our parents instilled college. That's all we heard. Well, now that's not so much the case. You can really learn a good trade, and you can get out, start making an impact in your community right out the bat. People who are graduating high school are going to stay in that community. That's the number one thing we're worried about, is keep retaining the kids that we have that are graduating high school within our county that we live in. And another thing is we also have kids that go to our colleges that are not staying and investing in Alabama. They're leaving after they graduate. So that's another thing that we're dealing with too. With teachers, they're retiring early and going to teach across state lines, and it's just something we got to address across the board, because we are seeing it all over the place. If you want a job right now, you can get a job.
I think that's pretty fair to say, and even with a historically low unemployment rate. You touch on education, and I keep getting told we haven't seen a copy of the governor's speech yet. She's going to give her speech Tuesday night, but I keep hearing whispers of there's going to be a lot of education stuff. We heard some of it in her inaugural address, but not a lot of specifics. So I'm curious what y'all have been hearing, what you think this session is going to look like education-wise, understanding that there is a surplus of education dollars. You've got talk of school choice. You've got talk of literacy and numeracy. As a caucus, are y'all talking through these education issues, or are you maybe waiting to see what the governor says Tuesday night?
We're kind of waiting to see, but we will be discussing it. I think everybody in the state of Alabama can agree that we have to do something with our education system. We are at the bottom of the barrel, and we have been that way for a while. I don't know, you talked about earlier about a silver bullet. This one is not a silver bullet to fix it, and I don't think money's going to fix it. I think it's a combination of different things in different communities. Leader Daniels and I had the opportunity to sit with the state school board at their last meeting, and it was very informative for both of us to kind of talk with them, and I think that was a very small step in the right direction. But we have got to get a grip on our education and where we're going and what we're doing to fix it, because what we've been doing is not working. On the flip side of that, with our pre-K programs, I think those are very beneficial. We haven't done those long enough to see the rewards from it yet. I think some of the bills that we have passed in the past are good, but we still have to see, in the future. So some of the stuff that we have done, you're not going to see the results for several years from now. But I think there's communities that are in the state that are hurting financially. They're hurting in poverty, and they are hurting in their school numbers, and we need to address those situations.
Yeah, tough to turn that aircraft carrier around. Doesn't happen
Yeah,
overnight, right?
that's right.
I was going to ask you about your conversations with the school board, because I found it really interesting, and I would say that over the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot of, maybe you call it miscommunication, maybe a little bit of bumping heads between the legislature and the school board. Just really didn't seem to see it be on the same page on some issues. Is that what y'all are trying to remedy, is maybe better communication?
Absolutely. You know, the number one objective is everybody across the state wants to make our state better if you're in public office. And if you don't, you need to go back home. I think everyone on that school board wants to see their numbers be where they need to be. And everybody in the state legislature wants to do the same as well. I think you have to work together to obtain the goal that we need to obtain for our state. But if we don't work together, we're not communicating, you're not going to be successful. It's impossible to be successful without communication.
Yeah.
But that was I think they're meeting with all of our leadership in the State House, and I'm happy for that. I think that's a small step in the right direction. But I think, we really need to talk policy, but we also need to talk about what is actually taking place in these schools that are failing. It's a lot bigger picture than just grades on a piece of paper.
Yeah. Interesting you mentioned the whole silver bullet point, just because I hear that more and more. If you go back years in education issues, whether it's, no matter what side you're on, whether it was, okay, all we got to do is raise teacher salaries. We're leading the Southeast in teacher salaries.
That's right. We learned that over the weekend.
Right.
That's right.
All you got to do is school choice or whatever. More and more I'm hearing people like you say, it's not one thing, it's a menu of different things. So I'm really curious also to hear the governor's speech. You mentioned so many new freshmen. You said 27 in your caucus? 26
new freshmen in the Republicans.
Right, Republicans. That's a lot.
It is
a percentage of your caucus. So and I've met a lot, if not all of them. I'm curious, how do you think they're settling in terms of the legislative process? I know y'all had like a mock session.
We did, absolutely. The speaker and I and the leader, we worked on having a mock session, and it was, I think it was good. It gave them the opportunity to kind of see the process. We even did the pledge, the prayer, clerk called the roll. I mean, it was a mock session. And I think it was good for me as well, as first time as, being the House Majority Leader, but kind of sitting and watching, observing. But I think it gave them an opportunity to kind of see it not on stage. And you can ask a question if, in the middle of it, if you had a question, you can ask a question. And I think we need to give them all the tools they need to be successful and make them feel as comfortable as they can. I mean, I remember going through those doors as a freshman for the first time, and
I was going to ask, it hasn't really been that long.
It hasn't been that long, and it's intimidating, I had Representative Shedd, that helped me, kind of mentored me, and he showed me like where the restrooms are. I mean, you don't even know where those are. And I think we're doing that same mentoring program right now with the new members, and I think it's beneficial to have somebody to call and say, hey, I don't want to ask this question in front of the whole body, but what do you think about this? And they need that person, but they bring a lot of professionalism to the table. I mean, from all kind of different fields. I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch.
It really will be, and I'm glad we touched on that. We're looking forward to having as many as we can here on the show. We're about to be a nightly show during session, so hopefully that's more opportunities to have some of your brand new lawmakers and hear from them about
absolutely
what they're seeing down here with these fresh eyes. So
absolutely,
we're out of time, but Mr. Majority Leader, thanks again for coming on the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you as always, Todd.
All right. We'll be right back.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Joining me next is State Representative Anthony Daniels, Minority Leader for the Alabama House of Representatives. Mr. Leader, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Todd. It's always fun to be with you.
you got a double dose this week. You were on my podcast. Now you're on Capitol Journal. We're going to keep this conversation going. But this for a reason, because we've got just a couple more days before the session begins. I know y'all have a press conference scheduled for Monday where you're going to announce your agenda officially, but I wondered if you could give us kind of the high points of what we can expect from House Democrats going into the session.
Well, of course, you know that there are a number of issues that are that we feel that are still unresolved. The health care access to quality health care, Medicaid expansion, is formerly known as, but also the grocery tax is a very important issue to our caucus, has been for a number of years since former Representative John Knight. And Medicaid expansion, of course, has been a topic of discussion since probably about 2010. And so we're just trying to keep press those issues a lot further and figure out ways to get some of that done.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the grocery tax, because you're right. Here we are again. I think it's basically every year for past 20 years this has come up as an issue. Sometimes it comes up and everybody knows that it's not going to pass. And I would say that was probably the situation back when Mr. Knight was doing it, because back then it was, well, it touches the Education Trust Fund. You touch 1 penny of the ETF back then and it's a no-go. These days there are other complications, talking about how to treat local taxes and things like that. But reading Mary's story and reading about the different proposals out there, it seems like at least these issues, these complications, are being addressed in a real way by people who actually want to pass the legislation.
Absolutely. Representative Penny McClammy, since she was elected in the special election, has been working extremely hard. But prior to Representative McClammy, there are other individuals that have introduced variations of the grocery tax, be it Representative Mary Moore and others. And so I think that we're finally at a point to where we can start having some real conversations. Oftentimes you hear from individuals that talks about the impact that it's going to have on the Education Trust Fund budget. However, when we talk about the savings for families in Alabama and having the ability to spend more money, not necessarily just at the grocery store, but also in other areas, we're going to recoup that tax revenue anyway. And so I think that there's a happy medium that we can reach because of that fear, like a grocery tax holiday for a month long, so that then you can actually have a real assessment of the impact. So if you take June, for example, 2023, and at the end of June, the full month of June, you do a grocery tax holiday for the entire month of June, and then probably by August 1st to have a report done after all the receipts are received, and you look at June of 2023, and then you look at June of FY 2022, and then you at that point say, okay, is there a significant difference in the revenue generated to the Education Trust Fund? And I think when you see that, you'll see that people are spending money. They're using that additional money and spending it in other areas that still benefits the Education Trust Fund. And so I think when we use those arguments, we're not necessarily digging deep enough to really understand that on the surface that sounds good, but in reality, I don't think that is accurate.
Well, it's also interesting because you hardly ever meet a Republican who doesn't like a tax cut, and cutting taxes on everyday groceries is a significant tax cut. So I'm curious, because the majority and the governor are talking about these tax rebate possibilities. $2.7 billion surplus in the Education Trust Fund, taking a portion of that, we'll see what's proposed, and giving it back to the people in the form of a tax rebate check. $200, $500, what have you. But I'm curious, do you think Republicans who do want to cut taxes with this surplus would be open to a grocery tax alternative or a hybrid thereof?
I think there are a number of things that they've probably not necessarily heard me talk about besides your podcast. Talk about a grocery tax holiday for a month long. I think that they would entertain that idea, because at the end of the day, for me, I don't need a rebate. I'm I do okay. And there are a lot of people like me in the entire state of Alabama, especially in the legislature. And so I think that for us, you want to make investments in things that are going to make a difference, and it's going to help the people of Alabama. Yeah, that's a small a token of appreciation, as I would call it, but it's long term is not necessarily solving the problem.
It's one check, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's not necessarily solving the problem. But when folks are able to save at the grocery store, they're able to spend money in other areas, whether it's a storefront in retail or any other items that's SNAP definition of what groceries are. And so I think that we got to do things like that to kind of open our minds up a little bit and remove some of the fear that you may have.
I want to go to another proposal of yours that you brought up here recently, and that is basically taking away, repealing, or what have you, the income taxes on overtime worked.
Yes.
This is interesting, and you brought it up at the BCA forum the other day, because we're talking about economic incentives, right? We're talking about what's going to be reauthorized, what's going to be revised in terms of the economic development incentives that we offer companies to recruit them here. You brought it up as related to economic development, that if you suddenly did not have a tax on overtime, that maybe employees would be more likely to work it, and that could kind of be an economic incentive into itself.
Absolutely. I think that any person that's out there working full time and go home at the 40-hour mark, that have probably worked overtime at some point in their career, are not as enthusiastic about it, because the time and a half is fine. But the taxes, the 5% taxes from the state and the taxes from the federal level and other taxes that are incorporated in it, doesn't necessarily make it as worth it, especially if you're making an amount like a $15 an hour. Mm-hmm. But if a person making $15 an hour was able to work, on average, individuals work about 10 hours overtime. And so if you have 4 employees that works 10 hours overtime, at that point, the productivity aspect of it for the business, you're producing, 4 individuals are producing at the rate of 5. And they're also saving on the G&A and other costs. But the employee themselves, they're taking home, if they're making $15 an hour, they're taking home $111 more on a 50-hour, during that particular work period. Mm-hmm. And so it's a no-brainer. It puts more money in the pockets of the individuals. We know that we don't necessarily have the votes to pass any laws around minimum wage, right? And so the market kind of works itself out in that particular manner. And so in order to be able to do something to help increase productivity, as well as put more money in the pocket of the individual that's working the overtime, it helps. You see now hiring signs all across the state of Alabama. You're riding 65, there's more now hiring signs than political ads or political billboards when you're riding down 65, up and down 65. And so I think for me, being able to get those dollars to the people that are working, men and women that are working hard each and every day. And then looking at other creative ideas like childcare and other things to kind of help really drive things back. And I think long term, what you're beginning to see is eggs are were $2, probably $2 about a year and a half ago. They're probably $8 now in some places, and it's probably a little bit more than that. Yeah. So if the tax at that particular point on eggs that we're collecting was, let's say it's 8 or 10% tax. So on a $2, you're paying 20 cents. But on $8, you're paying 80 cents. And so therefore, the revenue for the Education Trust Fund, the same product, it costs you're getting 80 cents on that product, whereas you were only getting 20 cents before. Mm-hmm. That's more money going to the Education Trust Fund. So the overtime tax, whether it's whatever item it is, it doesn't have to be eggs, but the overtime tax, eliminating the overtime tax, is going to increase the spending power for individuals, which then you'll start to see an 8-to-2 return on the dollars to the Education Trust Fund budget. And so it's a no-brainer. And it's actually going to increase the revenue going to the Education Trust Fund budget because it's the working class people are spending money. Mm-hmm. Because they know they're going to make money, so they're going to be spending money. And so when you look at the consumer behavior, it tells you, there's data out there that shows you the spending habits of individuals that are working class people. So therefore, you're going to see that money back and then some. I can assure you that it'll increase the amount of revenue that we're bringing in. Some people say, oh, you're going to take a little hit in the education trust fund. Well, you're getting the 40 hours already. You're already taxing that. This is an incentive for people to work more, increase productivity, but also give that employee more money to take home.
Mm-hmm. Switching gears, education. We are expected to hear a lot about the governor's education plans in her speech coming up on Tuesday night. She kind of foreshadowed some things in her inauguration address, but not a lot of specifics. So, hearing about Literacy Act, hearing about Numeracy Act. Also the nebulous issue of school choice, right? It's like everybody means something different when they talk about school choice. From your caucus's perspective, when y'all hear these proposals come out, where are you coming from in terms of where you want to try to use your influence to push that conversation?
So I've always been a proponent of cradle or birth to pre-K. And when you look at these communities around the state of Alabama where there obviously have been underperformance in some of the school systems across the state, you want to make certain that you look at the infrastructure. I can assure you that many of those, every child that's born in that community does not have access to an early childhood education program. We know that every dollar spent in early childhood saves $7 in corrections. And so if we know that it also raises the bar from an education standpoint for those that have that pipeline from birth to pre-K, and then it continues throughout the K-12 experience, then we need to make certain that that type of infrastructure is available in all of our counties and communities across the state of Alabama. And then you look at middle school. When you look at middle school, the reading scores in the middle school level in preparation for ninth grade, when they get out of middle school in ninth grade, they don't necessarily advance at much higher from a reading standpoint. And so we got to place an emphasis on the science of reading in the middle school area, parental involvement in the middle school area, and introduce pathways for students to become interested and be exposed to what do you want to be when you grow up. And then in the high school experience should be more about pathways. Mm-hmm. We've seen pathways, and so if you had a public health track or you had an engineering track, right? And so that student will be able to go and matriculate to the track that's most interests them, and so therefore it'll spark their interest and excitement about learning, and it'll help them have an in-depth knowledge of that particular pathway, regardless what that pathway is. And so those are the type of things that we have to think outside of the box in preparation for the workforce. We know that in public health, we know that in engineering and all those areas, we're going to need workers because of the type of recruitment that Secretary Canfield and the governor's administration are doing a tremendous job on the recruitment opportunities, but we have to make certain that the baseline is strong. And right now, the foundation is not as strong as it needs to be or it can be, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, there's this kind of experiment going on right here in Montgomery at a local feeder system, right? You're talking about elementary and junior high, like you said, and it's this conversion charter model where it's not a new school, same school, same in many ways the teachers, same building, all the same students, mm-hmm. but we're starting to see some dramatic improvements on just from more accountability, different sort of focus and all that kind of stuff. And so the more that goes on, I'm wondering if the legislature takes more of a focus on that kind of stuff. It's not a broad stroke. It's individual communities addressing individual problems. Like you said, attacking an acute, struggling school.
Absolutely, and I think that you offer the same things for schools that are performing at an average or at level as well, so that you don't lose anything. You focus over here, you take away, and so you got to be able to build. Mm-hmm. So you focus on the weaknesses and build on the strengths. And that's kind of the approach that you have to take in education, making certain that the options are there, the opportunities are there. This whole conversation about school choice, going back to that for a moment, it means different things to different people. For me, I have a choice already. I can choose to send my child to the public school, or I can choose to send my child to a private school where I pay for it as a parent. Mm-hmm. There's already a choice. When the individuals are talking about these savings account, and I've heard that it's basically vouchers. When they are talking about vouchers, I've seen in places like Florida and other places where they have vouchers, but the actual school end up increasing their tuition. So if a child has $6,000 max, right, per student, and that the tuition was $6,000
before,
And then the institute, we can't control the cost of tuition at these institutions, so many of them increase their tuition, so it becomes $8,000. So a poor kid with in a family that's right at or right above the federal poverty level, that parent can't afford the additional $1,000 to send that child to that private school. So is it about solving the education, closing the achievement gap, and solve the education issues that we're not meeting the mark on? Or is it about providing a tax cut for homeschool parent or for folks that really don't need it? And so we got to figure out, what do we want to do? What are we looking to do? And right now it sounds like it's the latter that I described, as opposed to closing the achievement gap.
Sounds a lot like questions we might hear on the House floor coming up here in a couple of months. Mr. Leader, thanks again for coming on the show. We will see you very soon as the gavel sets or sounds on the regular session in 2023.
Thank you for having me. It's always fun to be with you.
All right. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org.
Joining me next is Mark Fowler, Commissioner of Insurance for the state of Alabama. Commissioner, thanks for coming on Capitol Journal.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate being here.
Well, we always like to have new cabinet members on to kind of give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the state and the state government. And you're one of the newest members of Governor Ivey's cabinet.
That's right.
Taking over as commissioner. Did that start on Inauguration Day, your term?
It did, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, it sure did.
Well, could you just kind of share with us more about the Department of Insurance, its role in state government, and your role as commissioner?
Sure, Todd, I'd be glad to do that. First, let me just say it's an honor of a lifetime to be able to be here as Commissioner of Insurance and serving Governor Ivey and the people of Alabama in this role. I've been with the department actually about 10 years. In fact, I celebrated 10 years about 2 weeks ago at the department. I came on as Government Relations Manager, and that I had a lot of other duties too on top of that, sort of the legislative liaison for the department. And then that grew into Chief of Staff and then Deputy Commissioner Chief of Staff. And when longtime Commissioner Jim Ridling decided to retire, he was the longest serving appointed commissioner in the country at almost 14 years. And I had been with him for about 9.5 years of that, which was an amazing privilege. When he decided to retire, Governor Ivey asked me to step in and serve as acting commissioner, and that started in July of last year. And I was very honored when Governor Ivey called me and asked me to be the permanent commissioner of insurance starting in January.
Mm-hmm. And talk about some of the roles of the Department of Insurance.
Sure.
The way I kind of see it is, it's probably not uncommon for folks to have disagreements with their insurance companies, whether that's on the health, automobile, home. Those disagreements can crop up. Does y'all's department play a role in kind of mitigating those disputes?
We sure do. And so let me just back up a little bit and talk about the department in general. In the United States, the insurance is regulated at the state level. So we're Alabama's regulator for the insurance industry in our state. So we serve that role in general. And our primary mission is policyholder protection. We call ourselves sometimes a consumer protection agency. And everything we do, we look through that lens of policyholder protection. And in the middle of all that, we also have a role in market stability and promoting competition in our state. And that's particularly important when you think about hurricane season and coastal insurance. And we also investigate arson and enforce the fire codes as well. Because I know a lot of people probably don't realize this, but the State Fire Marshal's Office is a part of the Department of Insurance. And you're talking about consumer. We investigate arson, we enforce the fire codes through the State Fire Marshal's Office, and a big part of their role is investigating insurance fraud. And so we typically have 400 or 500 cases open all the time on insurance fraud, and we made 30 arrests last year, and we actually made a pretty big one this week in Blount County, where an agent had frauded his clients for over $600,000. And so that guy right now is sitting in the Blount County Correctional Facility. But you're right, consumers have disputes with the insurance companies all the time. And so probably I think almost 7,000, we received almost 7,000 complaints and inquiries last year alone from insurance consumers. And we have a team of people at the department, and all they do is sit in front of computers and wear headsets and take complaints and inquiries from insurance consumers. And you know, we can't make anybody, any company, do anything outside of the policy. That's a contract between the consumer and the company. But oftentimes there's discretionary decisions that can be made at a company, and sometimes we can step in and help them make a different decision that might benefit the consumer a little more. Or a consumer has a question about what's in their policy. What am I doing here? What's in this policy? We answer tons of questions just like that. And we have an 800 number that consumers can call us on if they want to. That's 1-800-433-3966. And we also have a website where we have a live chat. You can chat live with a consumer services representative from our department, and people do it all the time. I actually secret shopped it one time, and they did a great job with it.
A little undercover boss.
A little undercover there.
And we'll put the number and the website,
sure, that'd be great.
So viewers can see it. You talked about insurance fraud. This is where we segue into the Murdoch murders, right? I'm just kidding.
No.
We really want ratings.
Yeah.
Well, also you have another initiative on this roof fortification program, Strengthen Alabama Homes. Tell me about this, how it got started.
Sure. This is a really interesting program at the Department of Insurance. It's called Strengthen Alabama Homes, and it's a program where we make grants to Alabama residents up to $10,000 to fortify your roof against storm damage. And this started back after Hurricane Ivan and Katrina came through, and insurance rates were skyrocketing. People were having all kinds of trouble. Legislators were wanting us to regulate rates more than we do and set rates and all this, and it was terribly chaotic. And Commissioner Riddling, before he was commissioner, was involved in that, helping Governor Ivey through some of the, Governor Riley through some of that. And he basically said, look, here's the deal. If you're not going to, you can't legislate insurance rates, and you're really not going to change insurance and insurance rates in that area under those circumstances until you change the economics of what happens after the storm passes, because the storms are going to come. There's nothing we can do about that. And we were blessed to have almost 12 years of not a hurricane down there, so we had an opportunity to work on this. So what we did with that philosophy is develop a program after Jim Riddling became Commissioner of Insurance, to fortify homes against storm damage. And we partnered with IBHS, who's the Insurance Institute for Business Home Safety. They're sort of the crash test dummy people for home building construction and home fortification. They have a giant wind tunnel and research facility in South Carolina where they can they can build a home to normal standards and then fortified standards and turn on the fans and create a hurricane inside of a building. And you'll see the unfortified home blow out the back door. There's great videos on that if anyone wants to see that. Yeah. And so we partnered with them, and we established some standards for Alabama, created this program. And so if you're a resident of the state of Alabama with a single family home on a foundation, it's an insurable home, then you can apply for a grant of up to $10,000 and from the Department of Insurance to fortify your roof. Now, we only have so much money to be able to do that, but we have been able to do a lot. Since the program started, I think we gave our first grant out in 2018, and since that time we've distributed over $40 million to Alabama residents, and we fortified a little over 5,000 homes in our state. And Alabama's pretty unique in this. According to IBHS, there's about 50,000 homes with those roofs fortified to IBHS standards. 36,000 of them are in the state of Alabama. So we have more than any other state. In fact, we have more than any other state outside of Florida. They have a different situation down there. We have more than any other state, and all the other states combined in the state of Alabama. Governor Ivey has been a huge supporter of the resiliency program and is a big supporter of Strengthen Alabama Homes. So all of this has been done under her leadership, and we sure appreciate her support in that.
It's pretty impressive, taking that much advantage as compared to other states. And we want to put the website up there too, strengthenalabamahomes.com.
It's a pretty important program in our department because, we can regulate insurance all day. We can look at rates and forms, and we do. We look at thousands of rates and forms. We issue over 241,000 licenses to companies and agents and brokers and adjusters and all that. But this is a program where we can really affect the lives of Alabamians in this, and it's amazing. We've made grants in about 26 counties across the state. It's a statewide program now. It started on the coast. We've moved across the state, and we enter in special projects. We've got a great one going on right now in Birmingham that we have partnered with Protective Life, the City of Birmingham, Habitat for Humanity, which we partner with quite a bit in this, and IBHS. And we're fortifying well over 100 homes in 5 historic neighborhoods around Protective Stadium. And it's been it's changed lives. So one of the recipients said the other day to us, said, "It doesn't rain in my house anymore."
Wow.
It's been an amazing program.
Yeah. Well, look, I hate that we're out of time, but thank you so much for
Sure.
coming and explaining some of these things that, I love it when I learn things
Sure.
about state government, and I certainly did today.
Hey, it's been my pleasure to be here, Todd. Thank you.
Commissioner Mark Fowler, thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll be right back.
Olympian Jesse Owens dominated the 1936 Olympics with 4 track and field gold medals in the 100-meter dash, the 200-meter dash, the long jump, and the 4x100-meter relay. The Lawrence County native dominated track and field from a young age. While in college at the Big Ten Championships, Owens set 3 world records and tied a 4th in less than 1 hour. Owens is widely remembered as the nation's greatest Olympian.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. Remember that on Monday, we return to a nightly schedule. That's Monday through Thursday at 10:30 p.m. and Fridays at 7:30 right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.